Hi, and welcome to the Leaderonomics Show. In today's episode, we have with us John Canfield. He is a management consultant and president of Canfield & Associates. We're talking to John today about strategic planning and the 10 questions you have to ask yourself in the process. So let's watch the interview and find out what he has to say. And today we have John Canfield with us. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Welcome to Malaysia.
Again, fun place to visit.
So you are a management consultant and president of Canfield & Associates. You've been doing this for 30...
About 25 years independently.
But you started in engineering.
I actually started as a school teacher for 10 years, traveled around the world for a year, including Southeast Asia, and went back and earned an engineering degree, University of Minnesota, and then I was recruited to Intel, where I was the senior engineering manager, and then at Herman Miller in West Michigan, director of quality and director of research. So 10 years of teaching, 10 years inside industry, and now about 25 as an independent consultant.
Fantastic, and you travel extensively,
Quite
I imagine. Now, I understand you're here for 2 days in Malaysia to teach about strategic planning.
That is correct.
Now, you mentioned two different terms. You say there's strategic planning and then there's scenario planning. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Strategic planning is sort of a structured sequence of about 10 questions that helps a company decide what they're going to do for about the next 3 years. Scenario planning is a different structured process, a different set of questions, that when a senior team answers those questions together, they consider 4 alternative futures.
Right.
So very often one of those futures will be really wonderful, and that's called the official future, but then there's also an awful future. And then I have 2 other futures. And so in a sense, you would likely have a major question, should we improve our company in the following way? But I want to know my answer for those 4 different futures.
Right. Okay, so you're sort of letting your imagination and then trying to imagine what could be.
What would be different, I'd say, is that you're not letting your imagination run. You're basically structuring your imagination, because the 4 different futures pull you towards that different future.
Great.
And your job as a leader is then to decide with your team what you do in that circumstance.
And I love that you brought the word structure, because when I look at what you do and then the content that you go through, the word structure just jumps out. And you mentioned for strategic planning, there are 10 questions that you go through. I wonder if you could outline those briefly.
Well, the first one usually is mission, who we are and what we want to do. The second one, principles. And for the most part, we're deciding as a leadership team how we think and how we behave to keep ourselves out of trouble. The third step is often a scoreboard, which would be success as measured by. So part of that, of course, is going to be the lagging financial indicators, but I also want to identify the leading indicators, like do we have the right employees, are we providing the training, are we finding our customers, are we making the right sales calls? The fourth step would be to identify a vision, preferably about a 3-year view out that's very, very optimistic. And
Not beyond 3.
Probably about 3 now. I think other companies in the past might have gone to 5. Most of my clients are looking out about 3 years. And what you want to end up with are really 3-year objectives.
Right.
To me, it's identifying not only improving market share, but at the 3-year point, it's going to be at 80%, for example. There has to be a metric.
Right.
The fifth step asks the leadership team to develop a common understanding of what the future looks like for this company, including current reality. And so it's a series of questions about what our products are, to whom do we sell them, how are we doing, how are our competitors doing, what are our core processes. It's a very large diagram that I think of as a systematic map that helps the leadership team understand what's going on now. So as we begin to write our objectives and strategies for the next year, I know what I have to put up with, current reality.
Right.
So then the next step, the 6th, is going to be objectives, usually a 1-year view, the strategies to support them, and the action items to support them. The 9th step really asks us to consider implementation issues, speed bumps, roadblocks that might make it difficult to actually use the plan. And then finally, a decision on the leadership team part. How are we going to monitor this plan? Where are we going to do it?
And every step is essential.
It is, but to me the thing that's important to appreciate here is that the structure or the process is really not at all telling the leadership team what to do, but asking them at that point what would they like to do in respect to that question.
It's guiding them. What do you think are the biggest mistakes people make when they approach strategic thinking or strategic planning?
One phrase that I've learned recently that fits quite well is, please don't believe everything that you think.
Please don't believe everything. Okay, yes.
In other words, there are things that you are using as assumptions that aren't really true. And so as a leader, when you move into this series of questions, that you're open to listening to your peers, preferably people also outside the company, so you can expand what's actually happening and not just you, your ego, and your own perceptions.
Yes. And so is that why you have to go through asking yourself these questions? To challenge your underlying assumptions that you don't even know are there?
Well, that would necessarily prevent them from using their assumptions only. Someone's going to have to challenge them. So part of the structure is again to try to develop the atmosphere that not only do we want your truth, we want everybody's truth.
Yes.
And as you might look around this room, you'll see that almost all of the input that's provided by the leaders, they're all individually on Post-its.
And so what kind of atmosphere does there need to be, like you say, to generate maximum ideas, maximum dialogue? Because I understand you say there needs to be time put into setup as well, thinking about how this is done, the physical surroundings. Could you explain more about that?
Even before they come into the room, I want them to appreciate that they are an adult learner, and I don't want them to come in and only talk about what they knew. And so I will interview people and I will give them an assignment, and hopefully they gather lots of new information. So it's sort of like coming to a Christmas party where they have something to open for the first time with the rest of the leaders so they can create together. Then the series of questions is there to try to focus that information into what we might know as a plan that ends up with something they can even put into their calendar and hopefully into the calendars of all their employees.
And you're a fan as well of Post-it notes, I understand, and just really using the walls around a room. Well, if I look around this room here.
The funny thing about Post-its is that when an individual is asked for their idea, it is difficult, and especially for some leaders, to separate their idea from their ego. And if the ego stays with the idea, we're probably going to end up with an interpersonal argument. So the magic here is that if I write the idea down on a Post-it, and then I take the Post-it, I leave the ego with the author, but I still have the idea.
Right.
So it's the ideas that I'm interested in. To me, I will define collaboration as the team's ability to make a really good decision that everybody supports, and the best idea wins versus someone winning.
Yeah. And what about the role that, so let's say this happens in a company, and you are leading a team of leaders through a strategic planning process. What would your role be? Would it be more of a facilitator or a, because how do you make sure that you're moving forward, yet you're generating maximum ideas from everyone in that team?
Okay. I would say it's certainly a facilitator, but it also might be described as a meeting coach. You know, I really have no business content to tell the company how to run their business. What I've gotten good at is asking the right question and getting them motivated with a process that you might see on the walls here that makes it as easy as possible for them to share their ideas and then actually focus in being able to make a decision that they all support by the time we're done.
Right. And so say this was to happen in a company and you weren't there. It was just, you know, leaders in a company, for example. Who would be the ideal person to be the meeting coach?
Well, probably not anyone at that table.
Right.
The opposite of what we do here is called BOPSAT. Michael Schrage at MIT came up with this wonderful phrase, BOPSAT. BOPSAT stands for bunch of people sitting around talking.
Okay.
And the problem with a bunch of people sitting around talking is that nothing much ever gets done because there isn't any work, in this case, up on the wall. So it's sort of like deciding that you're going to build a house, but you're not going to use blueprints. And we're just going to talk across the table of what this house is going to look like.
What the wallpaper's going to
Hopefully someone is going to get up to a whiteboard or to a series of flip charts and begin to document what it is we're talking about, fundamentally so we can identify the options and then argue about the options and end up being able to decide which particular option we'd like to move ahead with. To me, it has to be visual. There's got to be a place to do this work.
And it should be ideally somebody external as well running it?
I don't think that there are very many leaders that once they're beginning to talk about what they'd like to have happen can step to the side and watch their team work without them.
Yes.
And very often, if it's the senior leader, there are all sorts of social and hierarchical issues going on that make it difficult for people to feel fearless in presenting their idea.
Right. Okay.
So it's kind of like why we go to doctors. There's someone who knows how to do this better. And
Yes.
to spend the time and the money to have a really good facilitator to come in is certainly going to pay off. And
Yeah. Great. Yeah, it's just like your mother said, I told you the exact same thing. Why did you have to go pay
There you
$50
go.
to hear the same thing?
That's it.
Okay, let's talk about implementation, which I think is step 8, step 9.
That's right.
Kind of
Step
about
9.
there. How do you ensure that employees buy into the new goals, strategies, actions that come up?
Well, I'm defining collaboration in 2 regards, if you will. One is to make a really good decision, but the other one is to build buy-in. So the principle that I emphasize in working with my clients, people support what they help create. So if I want buy-in, I really can't ask for it. I have to provide an opportunity to build it.
Right.
So, in the leadership team, that's going to be easier because those people are in attendance. In the case of the other groups in the company that didn't get to attend the strategic planning, often the process is called the W process. It's actually from what's called Hoshin planning. And the notion is that the leader and your team put together a plan,
Yes.
but then they send it to the next group, the group that reports to them. So that's the first leg of the W. This team gets to provide content, changes, suggestions, etc., and then send them back to the original group. So that's why it's called the W process. And this ideally is going to go into a number of levels into the organization. Most often the strategic team, the leadership team, is going to go from objectives to strategies, but then let the other teams do the action items.
Right. Got it.
So in that way, you structure it so you have the best opportunity to build buy-in because the rest of the employees are actually involved in the content. That's my alternative up there. That's going to build buy-in.
And is it the strategic team that also comes up with the monitoring plan?
Well, they certainly need to monitor the plan against the performance reports that they're getting. So in fact, they're in a position to possibly modify either the
Yes.
implementation or the content in the plan.
Yes. And so how often should that be happening?
I would say at least quarterly.
Quarterly.
Ideally, that's done in a room that would look sort of like what you see here, so the members don't have to bring in the data that, again, describe what they decided to do. In an ideal state, that's actually a room that they probably meet in weekly. And so the data that they use to generate the plan is available to make the decisions that they're making today, for the month, and for the year.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Not just 3 ring binders and not just off the top of the head.
Yeah, not just all in PowerPoint.
Very little PowerPoint,
Very little
if any.
PowerPoint. Yeah, I can see you're not a bit, everything, Post-it notes. Actually, just to wrap up here, I want to find out from you personally, what do you find most satisfying about your role?
Oh, it's like a coach. If your team wins, then you feel great. And if I take a look at the careers I've had, it's all about teaching. Can I, in a period of time, influence a group, in this case of adults, so their performance improves? And that's fun.
And so that's a great day. If you've led a team to win, that's a great day.
And if not, then I get to wonder what I can do differently. I too can improve.
Yes.
So in fact, in working with a wide variety of teams, that in a short period of time I can discover what they need in terms of support so they can be successful.
Great. One last question. If you could give one piece of advice to leaders to ensure that their ideas move to so idea stage, right up to successful realization of their plans, what advice would you give them?
If you take the word listen and rearrange the letters, what word do you get? Silent. And the point is that if you really want to build buy-in and you have an idea, you will have a lot more success by listening to other people rather than telling other people, which again would suggest that a leader going in with an idea probably wants to put it to the side and use a process like the one we're using in this class, which is, wide open brainstorming using the Post-it so all the options get up on the wall, and then the leader, of course, gets to put theirs up on the wall. But again, the best idea wins, not just that leader.
Yes.
So not only do I end up with a better idea, I also end up with a buy-in.
Fantastic. What a great thought to end on.
It's fun.
Thank you so much, John.
All the best.
And that was us with John Canfield. Thank you so much for being with us on the Leaderonomics Show.
Thank you for the opportunity.